You're listening to the Rosenfeld Review. I'm Lou Rosenfeld. And who is my guest today? It is none other than Prayag Narula. Hi, Prayag.
Hey, Lou.
It's good to have
Glad
you.
to be here.
Very glad to have you here. It's always a little fraught, right? Because Prayag is a person who is a founder of a company that many of you in the research world are getting to know about, Marvin. He's their CEO and co-founder. And if you're doing qualitative user research, that's one of the cool platforms that people are really starting to use and resonate with. It's so important to talk about these tools. We're not going to just talk about Marvin and tools like that. We're going to really talk a lot about qualitative research in the context not only of managing it, but Prayag is giving a pretty interesting talk at Advancing Research later in March 27th through 29th. That's when the conference takes place. It is virtual, and I'm going to plug it because it's a pretty damn good conference. But we've got a lot to cover, Prayag. And first of all, this is not your first go around as an entrepreneur, right? You've done one company before?
I have, yes. Not my first rodeo, as they call it, even though I've never been to the rodeo. This is my second company, and my last company was straight out of grad school, and I came to the United States to study, and then ultimately end up teaching qual research and design research at University of California, Berkeley. And really enough, my first company had nothing to do with HCI, a field that I had been at that point for many years. It was a completely different field. And when I left, I ran that company for a decade or so, and I left, and that company is still going. But I promised myself that the next company that I'm going to start, I will go back to my roots and I'll go back to my community. My community is research and design research. So I am really, really glad that I started Hey Marvin, got back to my roots, and conversations like this is what keeps me going. So thank you for having me again. I'm really excited.
Well, this is for me. Let's face it. This is for nobody else. Not even you, listener. This is just for me. And the reason is, every once in a while, I like to talk about this. That about 12 years ago, I was consulting for a large Silicon Valley financial services company. They move money around. You might be familiar with them. And I was going around for months and months and months trying to get my hands on research. And it was really problematic. It was really horribly problematic. So I was really doing a lot with search analytics at the time. I think I wrote a book on it around that time. And I asked them, where's your search analytics? And we don't know. And I think after about 6 months, they finally turned it up in some call center in Omaha. And then I remember I was walking down the hall, and they had, I just happened to glance into one of the war rooms, and they had an Indie Young style mental models diagram on the wall. It's an enormous diagram. I said, why didn't you tell me about that? I've been working with you for months. Oh yeah, that. And there was like many instances like that, which made me really frustrated in a number of ways. Everyone who knows me knows it's like frustration is my driver. So I was frustrated because there was no way to like put all these things together. And then, of course, the ongoing frustration beyond that was even if you could put them together, there was no real organizational or even cultural imperative towards synthesizing the different types of research and evidence that were being generated and all the different kinds of tools and methods that were being applied to understand reality. And so if you don't have those different blind men looking to see what and compare notes and put their ideas together, you never figure out that elephant of insight. And so I've just been waiting for tools like yours to start appearing, and lo and behold, I'm so happy. So, like, how did you? Is this similar for you? Is this why you got into this business, among other reasons that you've already mentioned in terms of wanting to get back to your home community?
Yeah, no, absolutely. You hit the nail on its head, Lou. One of the things that really frustrated me um, was that research and qualitative research, whether we call it qualitative research or not, is one of the primary drivers of decision making for all organizations. And I would argue it's the primary driver of decision making for anybody on a personal level as well. All executives, companies, organizations, all of them take decisions based on the conversations that they have had, the qualitative data. But there is no centralized place where people are looking at this. Even if the research is being done with the sole objective of making decision based on qualitative research, and that's happening in multiple places in the organization, not just design research. Pricing is a big part of pricing research is qualitative research. Big part of strategy research is qualitative research. You talk to any of the big management consultant, they spend most of their life doing qualitative research. Sometimes they call it qual research, sometimes they don't. But at the same time, there's no scientific method that's being applied at an organizational level that towards that qual research. And one of the prime drivers for me, and something that fuels me even today, is the idea that qual research is valid. Qual research is scientific. It's not, oh, that's just that one is anecdotal and quant research is more data, quote unquote. That's not the case. We in social sciences, we've been doing qualitative research as a primary method of science discovery for 6 decades,
Hmm.
right? But even today, you ask most of the organization, most of the people in organization, even sometimes the researchers, they'll go on to say data as quant research and qual research is kind of somehow, right? And I wanted to change. That was kind of one of my big drivers. I wanted to change this thinking
Hmm.
that qual research is anecdotal or qual research is not scientific or it's not a base for making decision, right? Why is there a data science for, like, we've been talking about data science, which is essentially statistics for the past 10 years in the corporations, at least, if not longer. But qual research does not get its due as much. So that's kind of one of the other big drivers for me was, I call it the tyranny of math. Basically what we are thinking is, like, if we are taking on math, if it's math, then it's valid. If it's not math, it's somehow not valid. One of my researcher friends put it, he said, the best way to make your research seem more valid is to add 2 decimal points. So instead of saying, 6 out of 10 people think this, you say, 60.00% of people think XYZ. So yeah, that was kind of one of the big inspiration, is
Well,
this this idea that qual research is valid.
let me
Yeah.
let me just ask you a question about that. So, there's a lot of, I think you and I could probably generate good 4 or 5 theories as to why qual don't get no respect.
Mhm.
And I'm wondering, as someone who is a tool developer to support qual research, if you feel that, like, the fact that, for years and years and years, we've been using tools like, Oracle to manage huge amounts of statistical data, quant data, that until we had some like category of tools to manage qual data, like, it's almost like if it didn't get on IT's radar, it wasn't real, it wasn't serious. I mean, do you feel like there's a legitimizing aspect to the research simply by having software to support it?
Absolutely, 100%. And if you read the history of Oracle, specifically, we talk about books like it's a biography of Oracle's CEO. He talks about how having tools that Oracle built made the processes seem much more legitimate. Like he was of the opinion that processes need to follow software instead of software following processes, right? I think, I hope that that's the case now with qual research, and it's not just like tool like ours. There are other tools in the market that are also making qual research much more valid, but or at least giving it that validity. But yes, I think having a software stack that prioritizes qual research is extremely important in making it valid. And honestly, it also makes it a lot more useful. Your data, your qual data is valuable, and it should have a stack dedicated to on its own.
Well, let me ask you an IA question. It's
Sure.
probably, it's for me, it's an IA question, but one of the other reasons I think we've lagged to have tools to address qualitative research evidence to manage it is that in many respects it's a more challenging technical problem because in qualitative data, which is highly variable and at best semi-structured, you have a real difficult time getting semantic value to rise to the surface. So meaning in your qualitative data requires typically or historically a huge amount of manual effort by people with brains. And how does a tool like yours really get at um, helping, at least not replacing, but helping humans, I'm assuming, do a better job of adding structure, adding metadata so that there is, so the hooks for semantic value are there. So we can actually learn from it. We can actually manage it. We can move it around and we can connect it.
That's a great question, Lou, and that's a question that I spend a lot of time thinking about. Obviously, so one of the as you said, qual data is inherently more challenging, I would say, than quant data. Partly it's historical. We have been doing math for 3,000, as humans, we've been doing math for 33,000, maybe 4,000 years. Qual research only came into existence, in the 60s. So it's a relatively new type of scientific inquiry. And our tool definitely, our goal is to add that context, right? Like make it easy to add that context. The one of the ways in which we try to kind of contextualize qual research is by using all activities of that are part of qual research and kind of connecting them internally, right? So for example, note taking is an inherent part of qual active. In fact, we went and did research before we were building the tool, and we had people who had never done qual research. We're like, let's go talk to these people. They would inherently take out a pen, take out a piece of paper. We're like, what are you doing? We are taking notes because we want to go back to this conversation, right? And so note taking is an inherently kind of inherent part of qual research. Question asking specific questions is an inherent part of qual research. All of this stuff that almost comes natural to people who are not even qual experts. We are trying to centralize that and connect all of that. A lot of the time, coding, data coding, or data tagging is a core part of qual research, and it is very, very important. But it requires all this training on what it's like to do qual analysis. What we are trying to do is tie that, those specialized work like data tagging or data coding with stuff that everybody does, like question asking or note taking. And that's kind of, we're trying to bring all of that together in one place so that the context is there
Hmm.
when you start to kind of, even when you're starting to have the conversation, the context is there. And then recently we've been leaning heavily into AI and using AI to kind of add context to the conversation, or using AI as a way to be able to help with qual analysis. I don't think AI or technology can ever replace the expertise of a person, of a researcher, but it can definitely help, and that's kind of what we are trying to do.
Well, that's exciting. I mean, there's three things I really heard there, and they all make me feel Some make me feel less comfortable than others, namely the AI part. But in terms of note taking, I got to say we've been working with Jorge Arango on his new book, Duly Noted, which is just basically a book about note taking. And
Wow,
yeah, and
that's
he's
awesome.
he's going at it from an IA perspective, but he's trying to
Uh-huh.
really open it up. And it's just one of these areas that we just take for granted. And the same thing with
Right,
question asking. And
right.
and sort of especially as like Chat GPT starts coming to the fore, it's so obvious in a way that like what they taught us in reference librarianship a billion years ago is about asking questions and iterative
Good.
question
Yeah,
asking. The prompts are really
right.
important, but the AI part is what's really generating a huge amount of light and heat right now, and for good reason.
Hmm.
So we're going to come back to that after the break. And I hate to keep you hanging, but it's time for a commercial. You're listening to the Rosenfeld Review. I hope you're enjoying the podcast. If you want more, not only do we have a whole bunch of podcasts in our archive, but we have something that's very current, very alive, and very engaging for groups, and that is our communities. Rosenfeld Media runs a variety of communities that meet on a monthly basis for video conferences on a variety of topics near and dear to UX people, ranging from an enterprise experience to advancing research to design and research operations. I want to encourage you to join one of our communities. Again, it is free by going to rosenfeldmedia.com/communities. Not only will you get a monthly video conference that you can listen in on and participate in, ask questions and so forth, we'll give you access to the recordings. And for some of those communities, we're talking about dozens of recordings with really interesting presenters and facilitators. You'll also get a newsletter. You'll get access to an advice columnist. Yes, we actually are providing advice columnists for each community. And finally, if you're interested in our conferences, our communities correspond to our conferences. So you will be the first to know when programs go live, when tickets go on sale, and by the way, most of our conferences sell out, and other good things about our conferences, such as when the scholarship applications open up. So go to rosenfeldmedia.com/communities. You're going to find something that's free, something that's interesting, and it's a great opportunity to find your tribe as well. We'll see you there. Welcome back to the Rosenfeld Review, talking with Prayag Narula about things ranging from qualitative research to research repositories to AI and qualitative research. But yes, I promise we get to that after the break. But I just wanted to clarify something with you, Prayag. You were talking about the capture of questions and notes and other things that help that semantic value rise to the surface in qualitative research. And were you saying that like one of the secrets that you're using with your platform is to try to, maybe it's not a secret, but to capture that at the moment of creation rather than post facto?
That is correct. That is absolutely correct. I should have clarified that. But yes, the idea is that the note taking, the question asking, some of the coding happens in context as much as possible,
Mm-hmm.
and that has multiple advantages, ranging from all of the data is in one place to it's a lot easier to kind of do everything in one place and use that as a way for insight to surface. So yeah, that's an excellent clarification. Thank you, Lou.
Well, then I'm going to make you clarify one more thing. You're like giving
Okay.
away access to individual researchers, right?
We are. The tool is free to use for individual researchers, up to actually two researchers. So if you're only two people in a team, or you have you and your partners are doing research, go to www.heymarvin.com and sign up for a free account.
Just tell them that Prayag sent you. Okay. Well, then let's get to the AI part. I know,
Sure.
probably a lot of listeners are really kind of itching to learn more about that. And
Uh-huh.
I've been fooling around with Chat GPT for things like comparing products and pricing, and I mean, it's like really amazing and really like frighteningly terrible in some respects at the
Mhm,
same time. I
mhm.
don't know if that's the technology you're looking to use with qualitative research analysis, but well, tell us what you're finding. I mean, I think this is what you're going to be talking about at Advancing Research with Rida Qadri from Google.
I think there's going to be part of that. Let me talk a little bit about my opinion, what I've seen in terms of ChatGPT specific, but large language models and AI, and then we'll talk a little bit about my about the talk that I'm doing.
Okay.
Um, so Before I get into it, I should make a clarification. My company Marvin is our top investor is Sam Altman, who is the founder and CEO of ChatGPT and OpenAI. He has no role to play in this, so anything I say is not influenced in any way. But for people who are going to look up, yes, it's a funded company funded by OpenAI's founder, but we have no connection
Got
other
it.
than that.
Thank you for the
Um,
disclaimer.
so yeah. So in terms of OpenAI, ChatGPT, yes, I'm very excited about the use of these technologies in research, and we have already started to use this in Marvin. So if you go, we have this really cool automatic note taker where it'll take the notes for you. We have some sort of automatic synthesis that's being done by AI, and there's some really cool stuff there that we are using OpenAI and ChatGPT for. And I think for some of the stuff, it's really, really powerful. It's really, really awesome. I think what it does is gives researchers, it doesn't replace research, of course. We would always need trained researchers to be able to do good synthesis, conduct good research. What it does give them is another layer on top of everything that they are doing, another layer. But it gives them another set of tools that they can make their work easier. But at the same time, it gives them another layer of like, here is what like an AI says about this research. Now
Hmm.
that's another data point for you to use as you're thinking about your research, as you're thinking about your data. Obviously, AI is not going to engage with the data like a researcher would, but it does give you kind of a superficial understanding. And it could be really helpful in some cases.
Well, let me ask you this. It seems to me that in any environment where you're trying to synthesize, well, not just synthesizing different sources or bodies of research, but even if you're digging into a single one, the to mangle Don Rumsfeld's quote, it's the unknown unknowns that are the hard part. The patterns you don't know to look for. And I'm wondering if AI tools, in your experience, are helpful at asking or helping us ask questions that we didn't consider, or helping us sense patterns that we weren't looking for.
They can, yes, and that's kind of what I was getting at. It's this idea that AI would give you one interpretation of the data, and that interpretation could be using data you might not have considered, or might have had, might have considered reference to data that you might not have considered, or ask question that you might, as a researcher, might not have considered. So. That's kind of, I think, the big advantage of having AI be your co-pilot and having AI be working right next to you and assisting the researchers, is this sense of like, am I missing something? Because honestly, like, one of the biggest, this, and our listeners know this, one of the biggest fear of researchers, there is like an insight that's staring into my face. I just didn't look at that data, or just never asked that question. And AI kind of, it doesn't completely remove that, but it does give you an additional sense of like, there is something else that's looking at the data. Odds of that happening, and AI giving an insight that you never considered, what are the odds? I don't know. They're probably low, especially in the early days of large language models. But it's definitely a really exciting time to be including that
Hmm.
research, and that kind of that kind of technology into our technology stack.
Well, it's interesting because the sort of classical problem with AI is its inability, or at least classically understood, is that it has an inability to to essentially code switch to understand different domains, and the fact that language is highly dependent, meaning wise, on what the context you're using it is, and in other words, what the domain is. And I'm not well enough aware of large language models to know if there's any kind of secret sauce to how they span different subject domains. But I'm wondering if you're starting to see anything suggesting that a research repository full of qual research from in a large organization might actually have a lot of different subjects covered. And are you seeing any, like, that AI is sort of running into a wall when it comes to helping you kind of cut across those silos, or maybe not?
I think the challenge with large language models is kind of similar vein, but I think it's almost the opposite, because large language models have been trained on pretty much the entire body of knowledge that human beings have captured, right? When we talk about like kind of 300 billion points, in the training data, that's a lot of context.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the challenge that we are seeing with AI now is, how do you limit the understanding of an AI model, of a large scale language model, to a research repository, to only the data that exists in the research repository, while being able to add context from the outside world, which is natural for human beings. And to me, that's a really that is an interesting problem to solve, and we are solving this in a kind of a smaller way already. And the goal is to solve it at a repository level. But I think that's a much easier problem to solve than the older problem of, like, hey, there's so much different context, and an AI, AI from even 5 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Lou, as you mentioned, the challenge with AI was, how do you take all these nuances of multimodal qualitative research and have AI be able to answer questions based on that.
Mm-hmm.
What large scale language model like ChatGPT or the Google, whatever that's called, Bard, have done is that they have, these language models are trained on so much data, and they have, what, 4 billion data points in terms of their in terms of their training. So they have the concept of a large part, or if not all, of human knowledge. But how do you take that and limit it only to your research, only to the research that you have captured, right? So I believe that that's a easier challenge to tackle than the one from 5 years ago. So I'm very hopeful that there is definitely a big piece that's coming in terms of the big advance that's coming in the use of AI and in qual research, and we are at the forefront of that, and we have been able to solve these problems at a smaller level already, and we're working on this. This is a really exciting time to be a researcher, and exciting time to be a researcher that's excited about the use of AI.
Absolutely. But I imagine it's also a time to be cautious and conscious. So I think that's what you and Rida are going to be getting into during your talk at Advancing Research in March. Do you want to give us just a little taste of that?
Yeah, no, that's a great segue. So Rida Qadri, who is a researcher at Google, in their AI group, is co-presenting with me. And the topic of the talk is HCI 2.0, human deserve the attention that UX research offers. And the idea there is, so a little bit about Rida's background. She was working on what she calls mobility systems, essentially, the Ubers of the world, the Lyfts of the world, and their application, their implementation in outside of the United States. So she did a lot of research in in Indonesia, studying these platforms. And one of the key learnings for her was the context, the understanding that works in Silicon Valley does not transfer to, you know, outside communities. So
Hmm.
how do you work with these communities, and how do you kind of, before you go and implement your ways of lives onto these people, how do you engage with the community, and how do you kind of do good studies to be able to make sure that you are implementing these technologies in a responsible way? There are a bunch of challenges here, and that is especially important with large language models, with AI, because these technologies have this huge potential, both for doing good in the world, but also for doing bad in the world too.
Right.
So as they are being implemented in the world, how do what is the research? And we believe research community's role is central to making sure that these technologies are built in an ethical way. They are being built with the communities, and they're being rolled out in a way that is net positive to the communities that they're that are going to use these technologies, rather than being a net negative. So that's the whole talk is about the role of research and researchers as central part of this new way of technology, it's especially and including the AI.
Well, you have the two of you have a really compelling title, HCI 2.0, Humanity Deserves the Attention That UX Research Has to Offer. That, again, folks, just to put in the plug, that will be one of the great talks that you'll be able to learn from at the 3-day long Advancing Research Conference. That's March 27th through 29th. It's going to take place virtually. And you've heard me say it before, and I'll say it again. Even if you're dealing with Zoom fatigue, our conferences are really a different thing altogether in terms of the virtual experience. So you should give it a check. You should check it out. Prayag, before we wrap up, let me thank you, first of all. I sometimes forget to do that. I'll thank you now. Prayag Narula, the CEO and co-founder of Marvin. What's the gift you have for our listeners before we wrap it up, Prayag?
I have two gifts. I have one book recommendation,
All right.
and then one URL that everybody should go to. So the book recommendation is this book called A Tale of Two Cultures: Qualitative and Quantitative Research in Social Sciences. It's a relatively old book. It's about 12 years old at this point. Gary Gortz and James Mahoney have written this book. And this was one of the transformational books for me, especially as we talk about qual and quant, and the intersection of that, and how kind of how you can combine those two paradigms. But their point is, people who operators from both of these research come from different cultures, so you have to start learning each other's languages to be able to be effectively use both methodologies. So remarkable book. Everybody should go out. I don't know if it's still in print, but if you can definitely find it. I found it used at my local bookstore. So please go. That's my book recommendation
Excellent.
for the session. And in terms of my second, it's I'm going to repeat what I said. If you're a qual researcher and you're looking for a tool, go to www.heymarvin.com. You can get a qual research analysis tool for free. It's built by researchers for researchers, and we are also very open to feedback and thoughts. And so go create an account. Let us know what you think, and hopefully you'll find the tool very, very useful. So those are my two gifts or recommendations to your listeners.
Love it. And it's, two gifts, not even the holiday season. That's very generous. So thank you so much, Prayag. It's great talking with you. We'll see you in March at Advancing Research. Looking forward to it.
Thanks, Lou. Good to be here.
Hey, it's Lou. Thank you for listening to the latest Rosenfeld Review podcast. I really appreciate it. I would love to hear from you. And if you want to pop me an email, lou@rosenfeldmedia.com, tell me what you thought. Better yet, leave me the hell alone and post a review on your favorite podcast platform. please feed the algorithm. It really does make a difference. We want to get the word out. If you like the word, give us a hand. And while I'm asking you for favors, don't forget, buy books. Support your favorite local independent publisher. We happen to be one, rosenfeldmedia.com. All those great UX books are there. So, thanks again.